If you are old enough, you remember the weight of it in your hands. The Sears catalog, the Sears Wish Book, the big fall and winter one, landing on the kitchen table with a thump like a phone book and a family Bible put together. For about 100 years, that Sears catalog was the most powerful book in America that wasn't scripture. And the company behind it, Sears, Roebuck and Company, sold this country just about everything it owned. Your coat, your tools, your washing machine. For a stretch of years, you could even buy the house itself from Sears, and it would come to you on a train. I'm Earl. I spent 44 years around Detroit's factories, but like every American my age, I grew up on Sears. My first good winter coat came from there, and so did my father's tools, and a Kenmore washer that ran for 30 years without a complaint. Today, I don't want to give you a history lesson. I want to take you back inside a store you can probably still smell. And then I want to show you something about how it died that almost nobody understood. And at the end, I want you to tell me your part of it, because you have one. Everybody our age has a Sears story. So close your eyes for a second and go back there with me. It's a Saturday. The big store down at the mall or on the edge of town with the name in those tall letters you could see from the highway. You walk in past the candy counter and the popcorn smell, past the rows of craftsman tools all lined up and gleaming under the lights, the wrenches and the sockets your father swore by, the ones with the lifetime guarantee, where if you broke one, they just handed you a new one, no questions, for the rest of your life. Past the Kenmore washers and the refrigerators standing in white rows like soldiers, past the die-hard batteries stacked to the ceiling, up the escalator to where they sold the school clothes and the work boots and the Christmas toys behind the glass. There was a counter where you went to pick up what you'd ordered from the catalog and a man who knew your name. That was Sears. And for most of the 20th century, that store was the beating heart of how America bought its life. Let me tell you how big this thing really was, because if you're younger, you simply will not believe it. It started back in the 1880s with a railroad man named Richard Sears, who started selling watches by mail, and a watchmaker named Alvah Roebuck. But the man who turned it into a giant was named Julius Rosenwald, and he built Sears into something the world had never seen. A store with no store at all, just a catalog, a thick book, hundreds of pages, that arrived free in the mailbox of every farmhouse in America. And out on those lonely farms, 100 miles from any real town, that catalog was a miracle. For the first time, a family in the middle of nowhere could order the exact same shirt, the same stove, the same fishing rod, the same baby crib as a rich man in New York City, and have it show up at the train depot. They called it the Sears Wish Book. And at Christmas, in a farmhouse in 1930 or 1950, the most exciting thing that happened all year was the Sears Wish Book arriving, and the kids fighting over it on the floor, circling what they prayed they'd find under the tree. And here is the part that stops people cold when I tell them. For about 30 years, you could open that catalog and order a house. An entire house. Sears Modern Homes, they called them. You picked the model out of the book the way you'd pick a coat. You mailed in your money. And a few weeks later, a railroad boxcar showed up with your whole house inside it. Something like 30,000 pieces of lumber, every board stamped with a number, the nails, the paint, the plans, even the little booklet that told you which board went where. Whole neighborhoods across this country were built out of Sears houses, and tens of thousands of them are still standing today, lived in by people who have no idea their home arrived in the mail. Think about the trust in that. You sent your money to a catalog, and the company sent you back a house. That's what Sears was to America. And I want to stop a minute on the man who built that trust, Julius Rosenwald, because it tells you what kind of giant this was. Rosenwald got rich beyond counting running Sears, and then he did something with it that most rich men never do. Working alongside Booker T. Washington and his Tuskegee Institute, He poured a fortune into building schools for black children across the rural South in the years when those children had almost nowhere to learn. They came to be called the Rosenwald schools, and there were something like 5,000 of them, and a whole generation of black Americans, doctors, teachers, a poet, a congressman, got their first lessons inside a little schoolhouse that the man from Sears helped pay for. I'm not telling you Sears was a charity. It wasn't. But the fortune that store threw off was big enough to build 5,000 schools, and that gives you the scale of the thing we're talking about. Sears even had a rival, if you remember, Montgomery Ward, Monkey Ward's, the other great catalog, the one that actually came first. For most of a century, those two big books fought over the mailbox of every American family. Both of them are gone now. And at Christmas time, the Sears store is where they put the real Santa Claus, where your mother took you in your good coat to sit on his knee and have your picture made, the photograph that's probably still in a shoebox in your closet right now. By the middle of the century, Sears wasn't just a store. It was woven straight into the life of the country. They made the brands that filled your house, brands you still know, Craftsman tools, Kenmore appliances, the Die Hard battery, Allstate insurance, which started as a way to sell car insurance out of the Sears catalog. Later on, they even started the Discover card. 1 in every 200 working Americans worked for Sears. And when they built themselves a headquarters in Chicago, the Sears Tower, it was the tallest building in the entire world, taller than anything in New York, a black steel mountain with the company name on it. Allstate sold you your car insurance with a promise you can still hear, that you were in good hands. There was a portrait studio in the store where the whole family lined up in their Sunday best to have the picture taken that went out in the Christmas cards. At its height, Sears had something like 3,500 stores and around 350,000 people working for it, a workforce bigger than some armies. Sears was the Amazon of its day, except it didn't just ship you things. It clothed you, it insured you, it built your house, it filled it, photographed your family, and it gave half the country its first job behind a counter. I'd bet a lot of you watching got your very first paycheck folding shirts or selling tools at a Sears. I'd like to hear about that, by the way. Hold that thought for the end. So what happened? How does something that big, that woven into a country, just disappear off the map? Now the easy answer, the one you've heard, is that the world changed and Sears was too slow. And there's some truth in it, so let me be fair before I get to the part that'll make you mad. The discount stores came first, Kmart, and then the big one, Walmart, selling cheaper and moving faster. Then the shopping mall pulled people away from the old downtown stores, and then, at the very end, the internet and Amazon came along and did to everybody what Sears had once done to the country store. They let you order anything from your chair and have it on the porch in 2 days. Sears, the company that invented selling from your chair, somehow forgot its own trick. They ended the great catalog, the Sears Wish Book itself, back in 1993. The world moved, and Sears moved slow. If that were the whole story, it would just be sad. Things get old, things pass, the young beat the old. That's life, and I'm too old to cry about the river running downhill. But that is not the whole story. And here is the part I really wanted to tell you. The part that took me a long time to understand myself. Because Sears didn't just lose a fair fight. In the end, Sears was taken apart on purpose from the inside by the very men who were supposed to be saving it. In 2005, a Wall Street man, a hedge fund manager, an activist investor named Eddie Lampert, took control of Sears Holdings Corporation and merged it with Kmart. He was supposed to be a genius, the next Warren Buffett, and he stood up and promised he was going to save these two great old American stores. The workers, the towns, the old customers, a lot of them believed it. Somebody smart was finally going to fix Sears. Now watch what actually happened, because this is the heart of it. He did not invest in the stores. Anybody who walked into a Sears in those years saw it with their own eyes. The paint peeling, the shelves half empty, the lights burned out, one tired clerk for a whole floor, the parking lot cracking. People thought the company just didn't have the money. That wasn't it. The money was there. It was being pulled out the back door. Here's how. Sears owned two things still worth a fortune: its famous brands and its real estate. Hundreds of big stores sitting on valuable land in good locations all over America. And one by one, those crown jewels got carried off. The Craftsman tool brand, the one your father trusted with his life, got sold off to another company. And the best real estate, the land under the stores, something like 235 Sears and Kmart locations, got spun off into a separate company called Seritage Growth Properties, a company that Eddie Lampert himself also controlled. So now Sears had to pay rent to a landlord that was its own chairman just to keep standing in buildings it used to own. The stores were being bled to pay the very man who ran them. That's not a turnaround. That's private equity stripping the bones. Land's End, the clothing company Sears owned, got spun off on its own, and he chopped what remained into dozens of little pieces that were each told to act like their own business and compete against each other. The tool department against the appliance department, all of it fighting for scraps inside the same dying store, while the consultants and the financiers took their cut off the top. And you can watch it in the numbers, plain as day. A company that once had about 3,500 stores closed them by the hundreds year after year, until there were only a few dozen left with the lights on. A workforce of around 330,000 people melted down to a small fraction of that. Every closing was a press release on Wall Street and a funeral in some town. The men running it called it turning the company around. From where the rest of us stood, it looked an awful lot like watching somebody sell off his own father's house room by room, and the furniture in it, and then the copper out of the walls, and calling it a business plan. So, let me say it plain the way a working man sees it. The story you were told is that Amazon killed Sears. The truth is closer to this. Sears was a sick old giant, yes, but instead of being nursed, it was strapped to a table and sold for parts while it was still breathing. The brands sold off, the land sold off, the cash carried out, and when there was nothing left to strip, in 2018, Sears Holdings filed for bankruptcy. And here's the kicker, the part that ought to make your blood run cold. When the bankrupt company was put up for auction, the man who bought the carcass for himself was Eddie Lampert. He folded what remained into a company called Transformco, took the last few stores, and walked away. The same man who'd run it into the ground. He'd taken it apart, and then he bought what was left. The man who promised to save Sears made his money taking it apart. And when a Sears died, it didn't die quiet. Those giant stores were the anchors that held up the shopping malls, the big store at the end of the mall that pulled everybody in. When the Sears went dark, the whole mall around it started to die too, store by store. What people today call the dead mall phenomenon, until you've got these enormous empty buildings sitting on the edge of 1,000 American towns, weeds in the parking lot. The ghost of the letters still faded on the wall where the sign used to be. You've driven past one. I know you have. Maybe you worked in one. And the people, the lifers, men and women who'd given Sears 35 years, who'd started behind the catalog counter as kids and worked their way up. A lot of them lost not just the job at the end, but the pension they'd been promised. When the bankruptcy got done picking the bones, the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation stepped in for some, but for a lot of those workers it was pennies on the dollar after a lifetime of faith. The appliance man who could tell you everything about every washer on the floor. The lady at the catalog desk who knew the regulars by name. The kid in his first Sears apron learning what a day's work was. All of them turned out at the end, while the man at the top walked away richer than he started. I think about the last days of those stores a lot. Near the end, they'd run the going out of business sales, and people would come, some to grab a bargain, but a lot of them just to walk through one more time. Old folks, mostly, drifting through the half-empty aisles where they'd bought their first refrigerator, and their kids' school clothes, and their wife's wedding china, running a hand along a shelf, not really buying anything, saying goodbye to a building. The yellow clearance signs taped over the windows where the Christmas displays used to be, and the workers ringing it all up, knowing that when the last rack was gone, so was the job they'd had for half their lives. There's a particular quiet in a dying store that anybody who's seen it never forgets. A big bright room built for crowds, with nobody left in it. Now, I promised you I'd be fair, and I will be. Your television is cheaper today than it ever was. You can order a thing tonight and hold it tomorrow without driving anywhere, and for a widow who can't get around easy, that is a real blessing, and I won't pretend it isn't. The world was always going to change, and some of the old Sears was slow and fat and had it coming. The catalog men who once ran the country's biggest store genuinely did fall asleep, while a fellow named Bezos out in Seattle quietly rebuilt the exact mail order idea that Richard Sears had invented 100 years before, only on a computer screen instead of on paper. There's a hard joke buried in that, and it's on Sears. I'm not asking you to weep for a corporation. Corporations don't weep for us, and Sears wouldn't weep for you. But here's what I think we lost, and why I wanted to say it out loud. Sears, for all its faults, was built on a kind of promise that a farm family in the middle of nowhere deserved the same goods as a rich man in the city. That a tool ought to last a lifetime, that you could mail your money to a name you trusted, and that name would do right by you. That promise built this country's middle class as much as any factory did, and the way it ended, looted by its own from the inside, while the people who'd believed in it lost their jobs and their pensions. That tells you something about the difference between the people who build a thing and the people who come along later just to carve it up. These were people who knew their customers by name, who could fix what they sold, who showed up for 40 years to a store that they thought would outlast them. And it should have. I built American cars for 44 years, and the cold logic that hollowed out my city is the same cold logic that hollowed out Sears. There is more money sometimes in taking a great thing apart than in keeping it alive. We are going to have to decide as a country whether we believe that or not. Now, I told you I wanted to hear from you, and I meant it. So tell me, did you get your first job at a Sears, folding the shirts, selling the tools, working the catalog counter? What did you circle in the Sears Wish Book that year, the thing you wanted so bad you could taste it? Did your family grow up in a Sears house that came on the train? And is it still standing? And the Sears you remember, the one down at your mall or on your main street, is it still there? Or is it one of those big empty buildings with the weeds coming up through the lot? And here's one more, for the ones who never worked there. Do you remember the exact moment you realized your Sears was gone, that you'd driven past it 100 times without noticing the sign had come down? Tell me about that too. Tell me down in the comments. Tell me the town, and tell me the year. Because a store like that wasn't just a store. It was where a whole country went to buy its life for 100 years. And the people who worked there and shopped there and trusted it deserve to have it remembered out loud, and it might as well be us that remembers it.